The first thing Elizabeth noticed when she woke up was the unmistakable smell of meat. Not the kind of meat she usually dealt with in the markets, but raw, fresh, and oddly comforting. Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep, to find her modest apartment bathed in the early morning light. The space was cramped, barely enough room for the bed she slept in, the workbench she kept her tools on, and the small stash of supplies that kept her life running. But today was different. She sat up slowly, her back cracking as she reached for her glasses on the nightstand. The dim light reflected off the polished glass of her helmet, reminding her of the world she'd come from, one of endless wars and galaxies teeming with conflict. She still wore the helmet sometimes, even in her small, quiet life, though the wars had long since ceased to affect her. Looking around, her gaze locked on the pile of meat by her door. It wasn't just any meat. This was prime fresh cuts of a large alien creature she couldn't quite place. She reached out cautiously, running her fingers along the smooth, translucent skin of the chunks. It felt like a form of payment, but not from anyone she knew. Her heart skipped as her eyes traveled further. Alongside the meat were 4 gleaming alien coins, shaped like smooth, polished stones, their inscriptions completely foreign to her. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't a random delivery. This was payment. The door creaked open behind her, and Elizabeth turned sharply to find Evan standing there, his tall frame silhouetted by the bright light of the hallway. He raised an eyebrow at her confused expression. "Guess the cubs really liked you," he said with a half smirk, crossing the threshold into her tiny apartment. Elizabeth stared at him, still processing. The cubs. What cubs? She pointed toward the pile of meat and coins. "What is this? Did they bring this?" Evan shrugged nonchalantly, though his dark eyes betrayed a hint of amusement. "That's what happens when you save their lives. They repay in the most unconventional ways." Elizabeth stood, still in her nightgown, and stepped toward the pile. The meat, though strange, seemed far too valuable to simply be a random gift. And the coins, they were far too pristine to be part of any regular trade. But then she remembered. The cubs. Several weeks ago, Elizabeth had stumbled upon a young family of alien creatures while out on a routine maintenance job. She hadn't intended to get involved. She was just there to repair a transport hub, a routine job for someone as skilled as her. But the cubs, 3 small creatures no bigger than Earth's tigers, had been abandoned in a remote corner of the station, left to fend for themselves. Her heart had gone out to them. She couldn't just leave them to die. So, against every instinct screaming at her to mind her own business, she'd smuggled them back to her apartment. At first, it had been a logistical nightmare. The cubs were small, but their appetite was vast. Elizabeth had scrounged up the best food she could, but it never seemed to be enough. Still, she managed. She had to, and every night the cubs had slept peacefully beside her bed, their soft purring filling the room. But now, as her eyes scanned the pile of meat, she realized that these creatures, these little cubs, were far more than mere animals. They had their own way of dealing with gratitude. "Do you know what these coins mean?" Elizabeth asked, reaching for one of the shiny objects. Evan studied the coin briefly. "I've seen them before. These are from the Arcaratha, ones with the insane sense of honor. Their cubs don't just give gifts like this. They see it as a matter of principle. You helped them. You saved them. They repay in kind. You're officially part of their clan now. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Part of their clan. She had no idea what that meant, but she couldn't deny that the idea of being tied to such a powerful alien species was intriguing. Yeah, Evan said. I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It means they'll expect you to help them in the future, whether you want to or not. They're big on debts. But for now, they paid your rent in full. Elizabeth's heart thudded. The rent was always a struggle. It wasn't the highest priority in the grand scheme of things. But keeping her apartment was a constant battle. Just another thing to keep her grounded on a world that often seemed so foreign. The Cubs had paid her rent, and in doing so, they had changed everything.